So we're going to do selected Rashis on the Parsha, that is on the Parsha that we just learned on Shabbos. So the first one I want to learn with you is in the Parsha of Pesach Sheni. Here we go. Yeah. Perek Tes, Pasuk Tes. Let's start from Perek Tes, Pasuk Tes. Let's wait till Shira Friedman enters the room. Okay. Oh, she's almost connected. Okay, we're starting Loscha Perek Tes, Pasuk, I'm going to read Psukim Tes and Yud, and I'm going to read Rashi on Pasuk Yud. Vaydaber Hashem el Moshe lemor. Daber el Bnei Yisrael lemor. Speak to the Bnei Yisrael, saying, Ish kihiyeh tomei lo nefesh. If there would be an individual who will be tomei because of being tomei mace, o v'derech kolachem, or if they'd be on a journey far away from you, o l'dorosachem, or if this will happen in future generations, v'asah pesach laHashem, he will make a korban pesach to Hashem. Let me read the next pasuk as well. B'chodesh hasheni, in the second month in Iyar, ba'arba'a asar yom, on the 14th day, bein harbayim, evening time, ya'asu oso, they shall make the korban pesach, al matzos umrorim yochluhu. They will eat it with matzos and bitter herbs. So let's read the Rashi on Pasuk Yud. Now, I'm reading from a really excellent set of Chumashim. If you're ever interested in learning, spending a lot of time, you can't. It's not that clear. Anyhow, this set is Chumash Rishonei Parshanei Rashi. There's a great Rashi scholar in Eretz Yisrael named Rav Moshe Philip, who has put out really good editions of very good commentaries on Rashi that were either out of print for centuries or never printed at all. And he did this over the course of 30 years. And then he made one set of Chumashim in which he has all of them right there on the page for you. It's wonderful. But one advantage and disadvantage, in our case, it's going to be a little bit of a disadvantage, is when I use this Chumash, the text he used is the text of the first printed edition of Rashi, Rome 1470, which he considers a very accurate text. Nobody's going to make the claim that any text except Leipzig is the most, but of the printed texts, he considers this the most accurate. And it is slightly different from the common texts of Rashi. And right now, this is the one I have in front of me. It's not like I'm going to have it in front of me all the time, but I'm going to read to you the Rashi, and it's going to be basically the same thing as you all have in front of you. There might be slight variation, but it shouldn't affect our discussion of the Rashi. So I'm going to read the Rashi on Perek Yud. Oh, b'derech rachokah. So we're talking about which people qualify for Pesach Sheni. So one of the possibilities is, or they're on a distant journey. So Rashi says, Nakud alav. In the Masoretic text of the Chumash of the Torah, there are dots on the word rachokah. And when there are dots on a word, they indicate that in some sense the word is missing. Its power, its impact is reduced. Lomar. So what are these dots here on the word rachokah, distant? What are they meant to tell us? What's the lesson that we derive from them when we read the pasuk? Lo rachokah vadai. It doesn't mean that the person during Pesach, when the korban was being brought, was distant from the Beis Hamikdash in an absolute sense. Ela shahaya chutz la'askufas ha'azara. but he was outside the threshold of the courtyard of the Beis Hamikdash. It just means he was not inside the Beis Hamikdash. It doesn't mean he was far away in the sense that would immediately strike us. So he was outside the threshold of the courtyard, kol zman shchita, for the entire time that the shechting of the Korban Pesach was going on. Okay, so the first thing Rashi tells us is that the Korban Pesach, that distant, don't take it in its simplest sense. Distant means anywhere outside the courtyard of the Beis Hamikdash is, as far as the mitzvah of Pesach Sheni is concerned, is considered distant. And if you missed out, even if you were right outside the door, you qualify for Pesach Sheni. Now, Rashi starts a second sentence, which doesn't flow directly from the first sentence. Pesach Sheni, the mitzvah of Pesach Sheni, I'd say maybe better, on the holiday of Pesach Sheni, chametz umatzah imo babayis, a person has with him in the house both chametz and matzah, the eino yom tov, and I think you have in your text the eino shame yom tov. That's the more common text. It doesn't have the status of a yom tov. You can do work, you can go to work. The eino asur le'achol chametz, and I think you have in yours the eino asur be'achilas chametz, if I'm not mistaken. But it's not forbidden to eat chametz on that 14th of Iyar, when the people who missed out the first time are bringing the Korban Pesach. Ella, rather, imo ba'achilaso. Ella imo ba'achilaso. I'm not going to translate that because I want you to think about what those three words mean. And I don't think I've done this in earlier classes. If you have an opinion about what Ella imo ba'achilaso means, I'd like you to share it with us if you want to, and we'll discuss and criticize it to decide whether it's valid or not. So just take half a minute. What does the last sentence, the eino asur ba'achilas chametz ela imo ba'achilaso, that clause, what does it mean? Take half a minute. Okay, Shira, your hand has registered, but I want to give everybody a little bit more time to think about it. Okay, Shira Kreinik, what does the last sentence in Rashi mean?
I think what it means is that there's no isser of having chametz, I guess, like in the house or eating it on the day of Pesach Sheni. Actually, not in the house, but I'm saying there's no isser of eating it on Pesach Sheni. The only isser is that you can't have it while you're eating the Korban Pesach.
Okay, it's Rashi started out chametz umatzah imo babayis. You can possess chametz. You don't have to do beer chametz that day. The eino asur ba'achilas chametz ela imo ba'achilaso. So the way you're reading it is that day, Pesach Sheni, the only time it's prohibited to eat chametz is with the korban while it is being eaten. Correct? That's the way you read the Rashi. Good. Does anybody have an alternative way of reading the Rashi? Okay, then I will provide it. The eino asur ba'achilas chametz, and on Pesach Sheni, there's no prohibition against eating chametz. Ella, rather, imo, the chametz can be with him ba'achilaso while he is eating the korban pesach. You see how that fits the words? So you can have two completely opposite messages, and both fit the words. So what does Rashi mean? Let me state the two options again. The first option we mentioned is it's the only time, basically Pesach Sheni is a weekday. You can have chametz at home. It's not Yom Tov. Go to work, wear your regular clothes. And the only time it's forbidden to eat chametz, of course, Pesach Sheni is different from other days because you're eating the korban Pesach, right? But the only other difference between Pesach Sheni and any other day is you have a very limited prohibition against eating chametz. You can't eat the chametz while you're eating the korban Pesach. That's the first way of understanding the Rashi. The second way is, in this last Rashi says, first Rashi says, it's a regular day. You have chametz at home. It's not a Yom Tov. The eino asur lechem chametz. You can't. You're not prohibited from eating chametz. Ela imo b'achilaso. But you can even have chametz with you while you're eating the korban pesach. You can even have chametz on the table at the seder. And they both fit the words. They read nicely. Neither way is forced. So you can imagine the dilemma the Meforshim have. But it's not so much a dilemma as a machlokus. Because at least the Sforim I saw, except for the very, very modern ones, the ones that were published this year, right? They don't present this Rashi as, oh, there are two ways of reading the Rashi, right? And we'll discuss the pros and cons in a minute, but they take sides. The early Meforshim, people have been writing about this since the 1700s, but they're all assuming one reading or the other. So how are we going to judge which reading is correct? So I would say there are two sets of standards if we're going to try to determine which reading is correct. And let me tell you in advance, we're not going to arrive at a definite conclusion. There are big guns on both sides of the argument. The Minchas Chinuch and the Pnei Yoshua read it the first way, that the only prohibition against chametz is while you're eating the korban pesach. Whereas none other than Rav Shach and others, but the others are less well known, none other than Rav Shach reads it the second way. But the korban, the chametz, it can be with you while you're eating it. Okay? So now, if we're going to try to arrive at a conclusion, and all of these earlier Sforim did, what standards do we use to judge which is the right way of reading Rashi? So the one that most of the Meforshim are using is one that we're not going to use too much in this class. And that is, Rashi generally, in his Perush on Chumash, doesn't paskin halachas. In fact, we're going to get to that even in today's class. It's very out of character for him to paskin halachas. When he does bring down a halacha, it's almost always from a much earlier source, from the Gemara or occasionally Midrashim. So one way to judge, how do we read this Rashi? Are you allowed to eat chametz together with your korban pesach, or aren't you? Would be to see, well, given that Rashi probably didn't arrive at this conclusion on his own, he probably got it from earlier sources. So let's look at the earlier sources and see if, let's not judge Rashi by the standards of Rashi, by internal standards. Let's judge Rashi by external standards. There must be a Gemara that deals with this. Are you allowed to eat chametz on Pesach Sheni or not? And the big problem is there's no Gemara that deals with it directly. There really isn't. So the Minchas Chinuch, he takes for granted there is no source for reading Rashi as saying that there is a prohibition against eating chametz at all at the second Seder. So, but he says Rashi is saying that it's prohibited, but he disagrees with Rashi because there's no source for it. Okay, that's the Minchas. The Minchas is the earliest one who writes about this. That's his opinion. And then, but you see, even to say there's no source is not a refutation of that reading of Rashi. It's a strong argument against. But, to say there's no source, even if you're somebody who mastered the Torah Shebiksav, Torah Shebal Peh, what that really means is I couldn't find the source. Can you absolutely say you didn't overlook anything, you didn't misinterpret anything? You can't. When the Minchas Chinuch says I couldn't find the source, that means a lot, but we don't call that absolute proof. Okay. Now, there's another sefer, a more obscure sefer, that brings a proof from a Rashi in Maseches Sukkah to the contrary. That Rashi, I mean, it's not a Gemara, but we have a Rashi elsewhere that deals with the laws of Pesach Sheni, and it sounds from that Rashi that he is saying you can eat chametz together with your Korban Pesach then. I didn't send you this source, but it's brief. Let me just read to you. I'm taking it out of context, but I'm giving you a whole clear sentence. Pesach Sheni Eino, this is Rashi on the Gemara, Maseches Sukkah Daf Mem Zayin. Pesach Sheni Eino Asur B'Chametz. Pesach Sheni is not forbidden in Chametz. Ela Shata'un Matzah LeMitzvah. But he must have matzah for the sake of a mitzvah, not because that's all you're allowed to eat. You must have matzah because I don't think I read. Yeah, I did read that pasuk to you. I'll read it again. Pasuk Yud Aleph, Perak Tes Pasuk Yud Aleph. B'chodesh hasheni ba'arba'a asar yom bein ha'arbayim. On the second month, the 14th day, towards evening, yasu oso, they shall perform the mitzvah of Korban Pesach. Al matzos umrorim yochluhu, they shall eat it together with matzos umrorim. So there is a mitzvah to eat matzah, but it's not that you can only eat matzah. You can't eat chametz. And then Rashi concludes, v'ochel chametz miyad, and he can eat chametz right away. So there are Sfarim that interpret that the way we gave one of the interpretations of the Rashi. Right away, while you're eating the Korban Pesach, from the beginning of the day or whatever, you can just unlimited chametz. Okay? So then we may not have a source from the Gemara, but we do have a source from Rashi. Okay? So that would point to the reading the Eino Asur Lachol Chametz, or Ba'achilas Chametz. On Pesach Sheni, Rashi and Bamidbar will be saying it is not prohibited in eating Chametz, Ella, but imo, the Chametz can be with him, Ba'achilaso, when he is eating it. All right, that's one opinion, and Rosh's opinion too. The diuk that from the Rashi and Sukkah is not found in the writings of Rosh, but nevertheless it supports him. I mean, the main support for this reading is there really is no clear source to forbid it. So it's hard to say that Rashi forbids it when the Gemara doesn't say that. Now, there's somebody whose name I don't know. Not because he has a secret identity. He goes by a pen name, and I see things that he writes. So I know his pen name, and it's obviously not his real name, but I'll tell you his pen name. Ne'eman, and that's with the Gershayim, abbreviation marks. Ne'eman, and then he has Samach, abbreviation Tet, which means Svaradi Tahor. And I know he's a Rosh Hashiva in a Tunisian yeshiva here in Bnei Brak, and he's a big Talmud Chacham. I wish I knew his name, but I don't. Anyhow, he starts judging Rashi not in terms of external sources. He just says, let's look at the words. And being familiar with the way Rashi writes, let's see which of the two ways of reading this Rashi better fits his style. And he makes a good point. If Rashi meant, as Rav Shach and others claim he does, that it is permitted to eat chametz even while you're eating the Korban Pesach, Rashi could have been much clearer. I'll read again the version that I have in front of me, which may be more accurate than the common versions. It's certainly, according to Rav Philip, it is, in general. Ve'eino asur le'echol chametz ela imo ba'achilaso. He says, if Rashi meant that you have a blanket heter to eat chametz on Pesach Sheni, he could have made it so easy for us. He could have said, "Ve'eno asur le'echol chametz afilu imo ba'achilaso," and there wouldn't have been a shadow of a doubt as to what he meant. And I'll add to that. I don't even know if you have to go that far. You can say Rashi could have really saved himself a lot of words. He could have just said, if he meant there's absolutely no prohibition against eating chametz, you can have it there at the Seder, he didn't even have to use the words Ela imo bachilaso at all. He could have just said, Ve'eno asur le'echol chametz. Period. Right? So, since he did add those three words, which are seemingly unnecessary, I think if we judge Rashi by internal standards, he's saying, Eino asur le'achol chametz. In general, there's no prohibition against eating chametz, elo except imo, along with the Korban Pesach, ba'achilaso, while it is being eaten. Now, then you can ask, what exactly does that mean? Does that mean in the same mouthful? Does that mean one right after the other? That we can talk about. But the wording of the Rashi seems to imply that. But then, Ne'eman Faradi Tahor, he, as a good scholar, he is aware of that Rashi that others use as a source to say that you can eat chametz during the eating of the Korban Pesach. I'll read that Rashi again. It's not in front of you. The Rashi in Maseches Sukkah. I'll quote it. Pesach Sheni eino asur b'chametz elo sheta'un matzah lemitzvah. You need matzah just for the sake of a mitzvah. V'ochel chametz miyad. And he can eat chametz right away. So they say right away. That means you can do it. There's no limitation. So he says, well, not necessarily. Maybe right away could mean right away, right after you're finished the Korban Pesach. You could read it that way. I don't think either way. I mean, I think it's up in the air. I don't know. You see, but all he has to do is really give you a reasonable alternative interpretation of that Rashi in Masechah Sukkah, and he has neutralized any diuk from Rashi. I mean, he's made a strong case that Eino Asur Lachol Chametz means that the only time it's Asur to eat Chametz is while you're eating the Korban Pesach. But then you've got the big question. Where did Rashi get this from? He can't make up a halacha like this. So he provides an answer. There's a Mishnah that deals with the laws of Pesach Sheni. There's a whole perek in Masachas Pesachim that deals with the laws of Pesach Sheni. And that Mishnah says the following. It's in fact, our Rashi quotes that Mishnah. The Mishnah says, Matzah v'chametz imo babayis. On the 14th of Iyar, even if you're making a Korban Pesach, you can have matzah and chometz together in the house. So Ne'eman Sfaradi Tahor says, if it was mutter even to eat the Korban Pesach with chometz, the Mishnah should have gone even further. Matzah v'chametz imo ba'achilato. Then, if the Mishnah, if it's permitted to eat the Korban Pesach with chometz, kal v'chomer, you can have it at home, you can keep it. If the Mishnah didn't go so far as to say that you can eat the Korban with chometz, that's because you can't. The extent of the heter is that you can keep it. But now that I think about it, that seems like a pretty weak diuk, because even according to the strict way of reading Rashi, that you're not allowed to eat chometz together with the Korban Pesach, you can do more than keep it in your house. You can certainly eat it next morning for breakfast, right? But it doesn't say that. So I don't know if his diuk is such a strong diuk. Yeah, I saw some hands up in between. Yes, Shira Kreinik.
Why does Rashi put this under this Dibur HaMatchil and not under maybe like Al Matzot Umurim Yachluhu?
That's going to be the next subject I'm going to deal with. Okay, that deserves a whole discussion. Any other questions? So my conclusion about this Rashi is there are two ways of reading the Rashis, and there are pros and cons to both ways. In real absolute terms, that makes this, in my mind, a difficult Rashi. It's not difficult to read. In fact, it's so easy to read, you can make a pretty nice reading two different ways. So it's easy to read. But each reading has problems, and it's very difficult to resolve those problems, to say which way is right. Okay, so now we get to the next question in. It says, Pesach Sheni. Yeah, let me read the Rashi again. Or if the fellow was on a distant journey. Now, kudalav, there are dots on it that minimizes the extent of the word. Lomar, to tell you, lo shirachokava, die, not that it's distant in the absolute sense, ela shahayachutz laskufas hazara kol zman shchita, but that this man was outside the threshold of the yard of the Beis Hamikdash, the courtyard of the Beis Hamikdash, during the entire time of the Shchitas Korban Pesach. End of topic of Rashi. Topic of Rashi, what does a distant journey mean? It doesn't mean what meets the eye. Good. Now he goes on to a completely unrelated subject. Pesach Sheni Chametz Umatzah Imo Babayit Ve'ino Yom Tov Ve'ino Asur Le'echol Chametz El Imo B'Chalato. What you have here are three halachos of Pesach Sheni. You don't have to get rid of your chametz. You don't keep Yom Tov, it's a weekday. And then the third halacha we can debate about. We're not going to go into that again. But the question is, what's this doing here, right? What do you suggest, Shira? What should the heading have been?
I thought if it was going to be under anything, maybe in Pasuk Yod Aleph, maybe Al Matzot Umarim Yachluhu. But that's not even like I don't necessarily think that's so strongly, but better than
Right.
this.
It's hard to say which heading to put it under. If I had to give it a heading, look at the end of Pasuk Tes, V'asa Pesach LaHashem. That means you'll make a korban Pesach LaHashem. I could have said you'll make the holiday of Pesach to Hashem, and then that would have implied all kinds of other mitzvahs. But I don't think you would have made that mistake, because the very next pasuk says you make it on the evening of the 14th, clearly talking about the korban. So then maybe the next pasuk. I didn't read this pasuk for you. Let's look at pasuk Yud Beis. Lo, no, it's still not going to go. It doesn't. The word Pesach in these psukim sound. Oh yeah. Let me read pasuk Yud Beis. Lo yashiru mimenu ad boker. They shouldn't leave over any of the meat of the korban pesach till the morning of the 14th. The etzem lo yishmeruvo, nor should they break any bone in it. Kechol sukas hapesach yasu oso, according to all the laws of the pesach, they should make it. That last phrase, I could see people saying that maybe you could have a reasonable idea that all the mitzvahs of Pesach are really they're conditions for the korban. Don't have any Pesach in your house, things like that. So you would have said they should do it according to all the laws of the Pesach. You could have said, oh, that includes making a Yom Tov, and that includes not having Pesach in the house, at least for the one day, right? So maybe that's the pasuk that could have been misleading. So then you have the question, why doesn't Rashi have that heading or whatever heading? Like even that heading is stretching it a little bit. But now I'm going to ask another question. And this question, yes. Yes, Shira.
Also, yeah, sorry. Also, maybe we're going to discuss this, but if Rashi is only commenting on the word rechoka, why does he also put the words obadera?
I wasn't going to discuss it, but I think it's not just a comment on rechoka. I think derech rechoka, that goes together. What does derech rechoka mean? But you still have the question, what's the O doing there? To which I don't have an answer. But of course, the first step to an answer like that is, don't drive yourself crazy doing this. But if you're learning Rashi seriously, look at the main textual variants. If you look at them all, you will be spending a lifetime looking at hard to read manuscripts and stuff like that, and you'll be wasting most of your time. But there are a few places you ought to look, which, if it's a possible correct girsa, it'll be, you might find one or two that don't have the word "oh." Depending on how many don't have it and which ones they are, you might reasonably conclude. You can never say definitely, but you might conclude probably O is not in the heading. But if it is, you got a good question. Okay, but now I'm going to ask you another question. And this question is based on a rule in Rashi, which I am convinced is correct, but you don't really find it in the classical Meforshim. I'll show you where you do find it. My camera is not so great. Can you read the title of this book? Well, it is called Derech HaMelech, and it is written by a friend of mine who, I don't know if he still teaches at Livnos, but he used to, Rav Yochanan Moshe Yosef, Rabbi Jonathan Joseph of Flatbush. And here, half the book is about a rule in Rashi, which he brings lots of support for. And that is, you have a few places in Rashi, I'm going to guess between 20 and 30 places in Rashi on Chumash, where he tells you halachas. So the question is, it's based on the assumption that we expect consistency in Rashi, A, and B, that it's based on the assumption that Rashi is real serious when he says in a few places, my only aim here is to explain Peshuto Shel Mikra, which means the simple meaning of the text. Well, if that's true, then listen, you're going to tell me all the halachas that are derived from the psukim, you're going to have an enormous sefer. Rashi tells us, I don't know, 20, 25 halachas in the whole commentary on Chumash. What? And look at how many of us have ever celebrated Pesach Sheni? Nobody. Nobody in Rashi's time did either. Of all the halachos you're going to tell me, you got to tell me how to celebrate Pesach Sheni. Oh, I got to know that. It's not in the Shulchan Aruch because it doesn't matter. We have a minhag to eat matzah that day. Very nice. Okay, that Rashi doesn't mention that. So what are these handful of halachas doing in Rashi? So Rav Joseph's explanation is, and I'm sure he's correct about this, that whenever Rashi brings down a halacha, the point is to clarify a textual problem. There is some problem in the text. All right. So given that these three halachas fall under the heading of b'derech rechoka, how do they explain, how do they clarify those words at all? So Rav Joseph deals with one of the examples he deals with is this particular Rashi. And you see that he didn't make up this rule. The rule is already assumed by earlier Meforshim. Notably, the Gur Aryeh, the Maharal, is one of the earliest comprehensive Meforshim on Rashi. And there's also another very excellent sefer on Rashi called Devek Tov. They say the same thing here. They say the following. Rashi just explained Derech Rohoka as not meaning what it seems to mean. It seems to mean, you were in the States during Pesach or something like that. You couldn't make it to Yerushalayim for Pesach. And he says that's not what it means. It means you were anywhere outside the Beis Hamikdash, even right outside the door. Right? So Rashi wants to defend himself against a possible attack on that pshat. Despite the fact that he has the Nekudos to support him, nevertheless, someone might attack that pshat as follows. Hey, Again, this person doesn't know the last sentence of Rashi yet when he makes his attack. He says, don't tell me Derech Rechukah even means right next door to the base of Mikdash. No, 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 right outside the doors. Derech Rechukah means you were abroad on Pesach. And you couldn't really celebrate the holiday. Maybe you were even a place where they didn't know the date. Maybe you just missed out on Pesach altogether because you were lost abroad, right? So then you get a second chance to do all the mitzvos, right? You can do bir chometz on the 14th of you can. You didn't do bir chometz on the 14th of Nisan. You might not have known when the 14th of Nisan was. You weren't even at home. Here, 14th of ER, you can do bir chometz, and you can, I don't know, maybe even daven musaf. Hard to say that you didn't have a korban, but you can wear your Yom Tov clothes and have a Suda and make Kiddush and do all those Yom Tov things you couldn't do because you were lost. So Derech Rechokah, it stands to reason that, and you're thinking, why else would the Torah have given me this make-up Yom Tov where, until Rashi informs you otherwise, you're thinking, oh, this is Pesach Sheni in the most literal sense. I'm getting rid of the chametz. I'm making kiddush. I'm having a seder. I'm wearing my Yom Tov clothes. Hey, if you're in Yerushalayim, right outside the gates of the Beis Hamikdash, you made kiddush that night. You were wearing your Yom Tov clothes. You got rid of the chametz on the right time. Why should they make a Pesach Sheni for you? Pesach Sheni is only for people who missed out on the whole Yom Tov. So therefore, Rashi tells you that, no, I'm sticking by my guns. It's not a Yom Tov, and you don't have to get rid of your chametz, and it's only for the korban, and that's why it's not far-fetched to say that the pshat I said in Derech Rechokah that it means somebody who just wasn't on the grounds of the Beis Hamikdash. We're not making him do mitzvahs over again that he did already. This mitzvah of Pesach Sheni is only a makeup for the korban, nothing else. You did everything else. The Torah isn't going to make you do it twice. That's what the Maral and the Devek Tov say. In my humble opinion, I mean, they said it, so I have my reservations about this. I think, if you really, the question that Rashi is protecting himself against doesn't seem like such a strong question. Hey, how can God give you a mitzvah where he wastes all your time? You got to do bir chametz again. You got to wear Yom Tov clothes again. I mean, that's such a big kasha. Hashem couldn't do it. He did it. I mean, if you ask me, there are mitzvahs that are a little bit harder to understand than that would have been had that been the mitzvah. You do it again. And because of that, Derech Rechokah must mean you're in a place where you just couldn't do these things. I don't think that's such a strong question. But then we're back to our original question. But you see, the big plus of that approach is that it all fits under B'derech Rechokah. Rashi is defending his explanation of Derech Rechokah. All you have to make up is the Korban Pesach, because that's the only aspect of Pesach that you missed. You really did fulfill all the other things. So they did gain that. The statement of these halachos is in its proper place. But still, it seems to me like a contrived pshat. So I have to provide an alternative. Now, do any of you have a Chumash Devarim in front of you? You do. Well, for those of you who don't, I'm going to read to you a little bit. Don't worry. And nothing that I'm going to read is complicated, and you'll all be able to follow me, even if you don't have the text in front of me. If you do have the text in front of you, So we're going to go to Parshas Ki Savo, Devarim Perek Chof Zayin. I'm going to read to you the Pasuk Chof Daled and the Rashi there. And don't be daunted again if you don't have a text in front of you. It's all real simple. What's the context? The context is, the curses and the blessings on Har Grizim and Har Eval. There are 11 curses there, right? So I'm not going to read all the 11 curses. I'll just read to you one of them, Pasuk Chaf Dalet. Arur Makei Re'ehu Baseser. Cursed is he who strikes his fellow Jew secretly. V'amar kol ha'am amen. And all the people shall say amen. Okay, so sounds like if you hit somebody when nobody's looking, there's a curse. So let me read the Rashi. Makeh re'ehu baseser, he who strikes his fellow Jew secretly, al lashon harahu omer. This pasuk is not curse, not to be taken literally, that you hit somebody when nobody was looking. No, it's talking about lashon hara. That's hitting somebody secretly, not physically, verbally. Now I will continue with the rest of the Rashi. Ra'isi biyasodo shel Moshe Hadarshan. I saw in the Parsha, the Medrash written by Rabbi Moshe Hadarshan. He was a French Talmud Chacham a couple generations before Rashi. Yud Aleph Arurim Yesh Kan. There are 11 Arurim here, Keneged Yud Aleph Shvatim, corresponding to 11 Shvatim, 11 tribes. Ukeneged Shimon Lo Kasav Arur. But corresponding to Shimon, Moshe Rabbeinu didn't write a curse. Lefi shelo haya belibo levarcho, because he didn't have it in his heart to bless him, lifnei moso, before his death, kishebeirach shar hashvatim, when he blessed the other tribes, lekach lo ratzah lekalalo. That's why he didn't want to curse him. Just a minute. Yeah. Okay. So on the simple level, Rabbi Moshe Hadarshan is dealing. The first part of the Rashi defines what makere ehu b'seiser, striking your fellow Jew in secrecy. What that means doesn't mean physically delivering a blow. It means telling lashon hara. Fine. Then Rashi sticks in this point that seems to be completely independent. Rabbi Moshe Darshan says there are only 11 curses here. That's it's obviously the 11 isn't a random number. Obviously, this corresponds to tribes, but one is missing. Why isn't it 12? And he answers, since Moshe Rabbeinu had some personal hard feelings towards the tribes of Shimon, because they call, because of the incident with Kozri Vasur and Zimri ben Salu, right? So since Moshe Rabbeinu didn't bless Shimon because of that, he felt, if I'm not blessing him, it's inappropriate for me to have a curse corresponding to him. Good. And the obvious question is very similar to the question we've just been dealing with. What does this have to do with Arur Makari Ehu Beseser? So, before I give answers, I'll give you my personal answer. And that is, yeah, there are Meforshim. The Meforshim accept that the curses here correspond to the tribes, and they match every tribe with every curse. It happens to be very nice Hasidic Torah on this stuff, but okay, well, that's not for now. Anyhow, and they say this curse, cursed is he who strikes his fellow Jew secretly, which means Lashon Hara. Well, which tribe do you think that corresponds to? Which of the tribes is guilty of Lashon Hara? Yes, Shira Kreinik.
I could be wrong, but maybe Reuven
Because of
Datan and
what?
Aviram. Maybe Shimon Reuven because of Datan and Aviram.
Because of the son of Aram. Nice try, but I'll tell you. So Elishav, you want to say something?
Was it like Shimon and Levi that they said like about Yosef? Like they talked
That's
about
true.
when he was
Here comes
coming?
that dreamer, right? Okay, good tries. And I'm not going to say you're wrong, but the Nachlas Yosef says a different answer, and I'll tell you why I prefer his to yours. He says it's Yosef. Yosef said Lashon Hara about his brothers. And why do I prefer his answer? Because it says explicitly in the Torah that he was Motzi Dibo al Echov. I mean, that's Beferish, the Torah attributes that sin to Yosef. Okay, so now that Maker Re'eu B'Seser means Lashon Hara, it stands to reason that it corresponds to Yosef. Okay, but let's say we took it literally. Let's say we didn't explain like Rashi. Cursed is he who strikes his fellow secretly. If it meant really physically attacking somebody, who would you say it refers to? Yes, Shira Friedman. Were you raising your hand? Oh, okay, it looked like it. Anyhow, so my guess would be, and you can go with this, it would refer to Shimon. First of all, he was the one who initiated the attack against Shechem, killing all the men in Shechem. Hard to say that they are Re'eh, but okay. But the other one is he's the one who initiated the abduction and sale of Yosef. So if anybody's striking their friends secretly, I would say it's Shimon. So Rashi is defending his pshat that Makareo B'Seser should not be taken literally, and it refers to Yosef. Because were it taken literally, it would refer to Shimon, and there's a good reason to say that Moshe Rabbeinu didn't want there to be a curse corresponding to Shimon. Okay, so in that case, this statement of Ramosha Darshan is there as a support to Rashi's pshat that Makere Ehu is Lashon Hara, therefore corresponding to Yosef, because if it were taken literally, you'd make it correspond to Shimon, and there's a problem with Moshe Rabbeinu having hard feelings towards Shimon and having a course. Okay, that's my pshat in the Rashi. However, I talked over this Rashi with some of my friends who learn Rashi seriously, and they present an alternative, which I'm not going to say is wrong, especially because I'm going to use it in 2 minutes. But I'm not convinced it's right, but it surely may be right. They're saying, don't go overboard with this heading business. Rashi might be dealing with a pshat question that doesn't relate to any particular words, but it relates to the context. And here, why are there 11 and not 12 is a legitimate Peshat question. Because listen, everything, this whole, I hate to use the word ritual, this whole mitzvah of delivering the brachos and the curses, it's being set up by tribes. 11 is a pretty close number to the tribes. So just for the context of Chumash, you're going to be asking yourself the question, why 11 and not 12? This is a tribes parsha. So after Rashi, you don't have this because you don't. If you don't have all the Rashis in front of you, you'll note that this comment from Rabbi Yoshi Darshan is the very last comment on this section of the Torah about the curses. So after Rashi finishes explaining the words that need explanation, before he leaves the Parsha, he deals with the Pshat question that's not tied to a particular word, rather to the whole Parsha that requires explanation, and that is why 11 and not 12. So don't try to attach it to Makarieh Hubaseser as I just tried to do. If that's a legitimate approach to Rashi, we can use it here in our question on the Rashi we've been discussing. Rashi's dealing with what does derech rechukah mean, and he gave a nice explanation. He said it means doesn't mean far away. It just means not on the grounds of the Beis Hamikdash. And then he tells you what Pesach Sheni is. Don't get the impression that Pesach Sheni is a full 1 day Pesach. No, Pesach Sheni is a weekday. But there's a special mitzvah to bring the Korban Pesach. Otherwise, it's just a weekday, right? So I could say, taking the approach of my friends, that once you read this Parsha, you could come away with the impression, and you can even tack it to that, I know, not necessarily to the words, but the whole Parsha, it sounds like this is a make-up Pesach. If it's a make-up Pesach, you might assume that all the mitzvahs of Pesach apply. Rashi says that's not true. It's a make-up Korban Pesach. It's not a make-up Chag HaPesach. So maybe we don't have to look for particular words to hang it on. But I'll just say maybe. And the other maybe is maybe the approach of the Gur Aryeh is correct, even though I'm not convinced by the details of the approach. But somehow this could be a support for Rashi's interpretation of B'derech Rechokah. Okay, until we meet again next week.